Madam President.
How are you?
Good
morning.
Welcome to the
Nice to
ILO.
meet you.
Thank you so much for your visit. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Come on.
Hello, good morning.
Did you want to present?
Yes, yesterday.
Today is sort of the big day of our conference. It goes on for 2 weeks.
And today is the 15th. 15th.
In a minute or two. Just a minute. Okay, let us know then.
Yes.
How is that? Because I used to struggle with that in the old. Thank you very much, Mr. President, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests. Let me welcome everybody back to the conference after the, I think, very successful panel that we had this morning to start our World of Work Summit on the future of women at work. And this afternoon, we are going to carry our summit forward listening to the three presidents who make up our honoured guests this afternoon, and I welcome them all. Can I just say a few words about the panel session this morning? There were many issues raised and a recognition of the distance that we still have to travel to get to full equality at work. But one issue that was highlighted, I believe, was the issue of leadership. Leadership politically, leadership in employers' organisations, in the trade union movement, in government in general. So I have to say that we are privileged and lucky to be able to have as our speakers this afternoon three women who I think can tell us more about leadership and gender equality than most. Let me introduce our guests. The first is the President of Malta, Madame Coleiro Preca. Welcome to the ILO, Madam President. I think this is your first time here in our organisation, but your career displays long-term commitment to the values and principles that are very much those of the International Labour Organization. Yours has been a lifelong dedication to achieving a better life for people who we sometimes, I think, mistakenly describe as ordinary people. I would say all people. Since your student years, you have been active in actions to achieve a fairer society, since 1998 as an active member of Parliament in Malta, where you have served in a variety of posts in both the Shadow Cabinet and since 2013 as Minister for the Family and Social Solidarity. The second of our guests is the President of Mauritius, Madam Amina Gurib Fakim. Welcome, Madam President, to our conference. I think it is true to say that the role of the presidency in your country was not perhaps one that you sought, but which you are intent to use to promote social and economic progress in your country. You have been described, I think you have described yourself, as a biodiversity scientist, a chemist, a leading expert on the flora of Mauritius, an academic, or simply a gardener. And we should not forget to add entrepreneur to the list of your qualities. Your work has brought you international recognition, and we are very pleased to add to that today. Since assuming office as president of your country in 2015, you have put your rich experience at the service of your country and your region. And importantly, given today's theme, you pledged to use the influence of office to promote gender equality, to be a role model, to send a clear message that, yes, it is possible if you are a woman. And I think that this is a message that has resonated already very strongly in this hall. You bring your passion for science and technology to the development challenges of Mauritius and of your continent, and it's natural that you are a powerful advocate for developing an African scientific capacity, playing a key role in launching the Alliance for accelerating excellence in science in Africa. You also bring your scientific background to the challenge of climate change, which has been much discussed from this podium in the last 2 weeks, as an advocate for developing the knowledge that is needed to develop effective responses in your region. So, Madam President, thank you. Thank you for being with us and bringing all of your experience and all of your vision for the future of work in Mauritius and in the world. And thirdly, our third eminent president we receive today is a president of Nepal, Bidya Devi Bhandari. Madam President, you are also extremely welcome here. I'm tempted to say welcome home, because you have been a lifelong activist for labour rights, and particularly the rights of women at work. The fight for gender equality has been woven into your lifelong dedication to values and principles. As a charismatic student leader, you stood up for equal rights and opportunity for young people across your country. But you were also part of a broader movement, demonstrating great courage during a 15-year struggle to promote equal rights for all against political obstacles. In 1993, you joined the General Federation of Nepalese Trade Unions, where as chief of the Women's Workers Department, you succeeded in raising the prominence of women in the modern Nepali trade union movement. Not long after, in 1994, you were elected to Parliament and became a powerful advocate for greater female representation in government. You were instrumental in establishing a 1/3 quota for the representation of women in all elected bodies in government and in state mechanisms. And today, women of all caste and ethnic groups are represented in Nepal's legislature. Defying all common gender stereotypes, and not only in Nepal in 2009, you took on the role of Minister of Defence. Madam Minister, you are very, very welcome here. We are honoured to have you amongst us. Colleagues, we are honoured by the presence of all of our guests. You have welcomed them most warmly. I'm tempted to say that this is a 3-star event, but it's actually a 6-star event. A unique moment when we welcome 3 women leaders, 3 presidents of our member states, in a setting which could not be more appropriate, the International Labour Conference, with the subject, the future of women at work. I thank you all.
Your Excellencies, my colleagues, President of Mauritius and President of Nepal, Director General, distinguished guests, dear friends. I would like to take this opportunity to commend the International Labour Organization and your collaborators for hosting this summit as part of the Women at Work Centenary Initiative. It is truly an honor to participate in this World of Work Summit, which is focusing on building a better future for all the people of our world. I am convinced that a future for all of humanity will only be possible if we take action together to ensure proper access to education and dignified work opportunities for all women across the globe. I believe that by targeting such an important issue and inviting so many contributors, this summit will help us to keep on track with the United Nations Agenda 2030 and hopefully implement its Sustainable Development Goals. I believe Agenda 2030 and its Sustainable Development Goals offers us the most structured framework that can help us achieve meaningful change. Agenda 2030 is a pathway to help us hold ourselves, our authorities, and our nations accountable to the most essential socio-economic issues. At this point, I wish to draw your attention, in particular, to some of these global goals. Addressing global inequity and injustice is our first and most urgent concern. For this reason, Sustainable Development Goal number 1 focuses our attention on the eradication of poverty. The United Nations Development Fund for Women identifies feminization of poverty as an issue of global concern by calling for us to focus on, and I quote, "The burden of poverty borne by women, especially in developing countries, is different from that of men, and a multidimensional approach is critical to assess issues of gender and poverty," end quote. Education is key to ending such poverty and precarity in all our societies. This is highlighted in Sustainable Development Goal number 4. I believe that the international community must put into more effort to prioritize equitable access to quality education for all. Access to education and the opportunities which this brings must be an intrinsic component in our global strategies to empower women and girls. In the inspirational words of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala, "It is not time to tell the leaders to realize how important education is. They already know it. Their own children are in good schools. Now it is time to call them to take action," end quote. I believe Malala's words condemn the lack of effective action which is still going on when it comes to the education of our girls. We must support these young women, including the large numbers of girls in refugee camps who are being denied the opportunity to receive a quality education, which could transform their future and our future for the better. We cannot be short-sighted. When women and girls receive a quality education, which is their due, then our societies and our nations also stand to benefit. Definitely, the whole of humanity benefits through the education of our children. Therefore, when we prioritize education, we shall be creating the groundwork that leads to Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which explicitly commits the international community to achieve gender equality in the process of transforming our world. I believe that as an international community, we must focus more energy on Target 5.5, which states, and I quote, "To ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life," end quote. In order to achieve this target, many more women must be included in positions of social and political influence. This must be paralleled by an increase in the number of women who hold managerial and policy-making positions. Women's voices must be heard, and women's needs must be acted upon at all levels of influence, including management and leadership. It is in this way that I believe that we can do much more to ensure our policies accurately respond to women's real challenges with real solutions. Furthermore, Sustainable Development Goal 8, especially Target 8.5, highlights the importance of decent work. It reminds us of the crucial need to stimulate our economies and provide equal opportunities for both women and men. The importance of building an inclusive economy which celebrates the participation of all individuals and communities makes it clear that we are committed to achieve a more respectful and sustainable future for all of us. As we can clearly see, the Sustainable Development Goals and their targets offer us a new way to think of our global development as fundamentally interrelated. The SDGs presents us with a roadmap for the future by encouraging and empowering us to take action, particularly on behalf of and with the vulnerable, the marginalized, and the oppressed. In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., and I quote, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. We are tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." End quote. We must be more aware and make others aware that any and all experiences of exclusion within the tightly interlinked systems of our social, economic, political, and ecological lives are having devastating repercussions which are felt by all of us. This is because our lives as one humanity are profoundly interconnected. Whatever disadvantages are experienced in one part of a system are inevitably experienced by all of us. So too will our efforts to achieve positive changes have far-reaching effects across the board. For this reason, women's full, equitable, and global participation in the world of work is not only a matter of importance to women. The participation of women at all levels of society is a matter of fundamental human rights. It is imperative for all humanity. The participation of women in the world of work is an essential component to create practical solutions for prosperity. Undoubtedly, the participation of women is essential to meet the social, economic, political, and ecological challenges that are taking place around the globe. According to last year's report from the World Economic Forum, it could take up to 170 years to eradicate the growing disparity in pay and employment opportunities faced by women worldwide. The report states, and I quote, "More than a decade of data has revealed that progress is still too slow for realizing the full potential of one half of humanity within our lifetimes." End quote. Such reports and indicators are an urgent call to action for the international community to accelerate gender equality and equitable participation in the economy. I believe we must be courageous to develop bolder policies which target the economic, social, and cultural barriers still faced by women across the globe to achieve parity in the world of work. Gender inequality is not only a pressing issue of moral significance, it is a challenge of critical importance to our economies. The global economy will continue to suffer greatly if women continue to be excluded. A recent report published by the international consultation group, McKinsey Global Institute, makes it clear that achieving women's equality can add over 10 trillion euros to global growth. We cannot afford to keep ignoring these economic implications. We cannot ignore the negative effects which a lack of gender parity is having on the economies of our communities and nations. Even after decades of progress to ensure equal representation of women alongside men in social, economic, and political spheres, the gap between men and women remains unacceptably wide. We must tackle the complex causes of this gap, including obstacles of culture and tradition. We must use our clout to encourage a global process of empowerment which gives women full sovereignty of their own choices in the world of work. I believe that the sector, through the business communities of our different nations, has a strong role to play. I urge the private sector to focus on the substantial economic opportunities which we all stand to gain from by achieving gender parity. Moreover, we cannot fool ourselves into thinking that gender disparities in the world of work are simply a problem for developing nations. The gender pay gap in developed countries is also a cause of great concern. According to the World Bank's gender indicators, women in most countries are earning, on average, only 60 to 75% of the wages received by men. Women are more likely to engage in unpaid family work or to be involved in low productivity activities in the informal sector. According to data from the United Nations Statistics Division about women of the world, and I quote, only 50% of women of working age are in the labor force, compared to 77% of men, end quote. We must also focus our attention on these women who face multiple levels of exclusion from dignified work. In particular, we must stand by women and girls who have been caught up in migration. Migration is often a desperate way to escape poverty, precarity, and conflict. For many women, migration creates its own risks, such as exposure to modern forms of slavery, which include exploitative work, abuse, and increased vulnerability to violence. I believe the international community must take urgent action to protect women who are at risk of these dangers. We must ensure that the dignity and the well-being of all individuals are at the center of our migration legislation and policies. Let me urge you to join the call being led by United Nations women who are advocating, and I quote, for employment policies that improve labor market conditions and advance decent work for women, including domestic workers, and promote women's economic leadership, whether in public decision-making, on corporate boards, or in labor unions, end quote. Furthermore, I believe that this summit presents us with an excellent opportunity to celebrate a recent indicator from the United Nations, which reveals that 2/3 of countries in developing regions have now achieved gender parity in primary education. As I have stated, education is a cornerstone of our strategies to address poverty and gender equality. We should therefore acknowledge this important achievement in the light of the importance of education to empower communities and to achieve all other kinds of change. In this context, let me remind you of the inspiring words of Nelson Mandela. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, end quote. However, we cannot lose sight of the fact that such successful outcomes in the sphere of education do not automatically translate into larger economic or social benefits for women in the world of work. In fact, there is much more that must be done. For this reason, I believe that we need an approach that is sensitive to differences of culture in which education, economic empowerment, and political visibility are closely interlinked. In this context, I believe we must challenge our mindset by asking some pertinent questions. How can our indicators reflect the needs of specific communities so as to make visible the real challenges that they are facing and create a practical change? How can we measure the ways that different communities perceive their own standards for success in the journey towards gender parity in the world of work? Rather than impose our own standards, how can we do more to ensure that the well-being of women and girls is the heart of our initiatives? I believe that we must do more to listen to what women and girls have to say and then take action to address their experiences. Therefore, I urge all stakeholders involved in this summit to prioritize the needs and requirements of all local communities. We must highlight a bottom-up approach which puts the individual and community at the center of all our strategies. In this way, we shall be better placed to achieve greater gender parity, while also understanding the contextual needs of particular communities. Moreover, when we prioritize gender mainstreaming in education and other sectors, this will naturally lead to women playing a greater part in the social, economic, and political life of their communities, societies, and nations. In this way, our efforts will encourage a collaborative system of empowerment, which recognizes and celebrates the differences of our cultures, while still upholding the fundamental rights of each and every woman to be in control of her own destiny. We need structured processes of participation and dialogue so as to create safe spaces to listen, to understand how people think, to discover what they believe, and to how best to work with them. Encouraging communities to make choices about their own values rather than imposing our own will certainly increase our chances of success. When communities take ownership over the values of equity and equality, then a cultural legacy is created. It is this legacy of benefit to both present and future generations which is the only truly sustainable way forward. I believe that at this critical time in the history of our world, we must work together to create a legacy of social, political, and economic empowerment for women. In order to achieve this goal, we must promote policies that highlight a healthy work-life balance as part and parcel of decent and dignified work conditions for women. These policies must include a focus on supporting structures. Let me share an example from my own country, Malta. Last year's Eurostat figures show that Malta experienced the largest employment increase of any other EU member state, which has had direct benefits for women of working age. These were supported by legislation, structures, and policies which targeted the needs of women, such as structures which included free access to childcare centers for working women. This had an immense impact on women's working lives in Malta. Furthermore, there has been a slow but steady increase in the participation of women in the Maltese workforce. Inspired by such developments, which are taking place in our various nations, we must create a legacy that places women and their experiences at the center of our deliberations. In this way, we shall build truly inclusive economies which value the equitable and equal participation of women alongside men as full and respected collaborators who are strengthening our societies and our nations. We cannot afford to be complacent. The time for action is now. Let us work together to make a difference for all women and girls everywhere across our world. Thank you.